Hello and welcome to our talk. My name is Yacine Jernite, and along with my colleague, Dr. Margaret Mitchell, we're going to talk to you about work we have done over the last year with all of our wonderful co-authors listed here. We can see some of their faces. Specifically, we're going to talk to you about data governance in the context of large-scale data-driven language technologies. Why should our communities care about data governance? In recent years, we have seen machine learning systems grow significantly in the amount of data they can absorb. This is important because machine learning systems fall within the category of data-driven technology. This means that both the performance of the systems and the range of situations they can be applied to strongly depend on the training data. While this has motivated much recent work in our field to increase the training data capacity of these models so that the quantity of data they can see at training time has drastically increased, there has been comparatively less attention paid to ensuring that sufficiently diverse and representative data is indeed available to them, especially in a way that respects the data and algorithm subjects' rights and upholds their interests. The work we're presenting here proposes to address this issue by focusing on the following two questions. First, how can we bring together heterogeneous sources of data with different owners, stakeholders, and often located in different jurisdictions in the respect of the rights legally guaranteed to their owners and their data subjects? And second, how can we give data owners and right holders more control over uses of their data so they can shape the development process of new technology as active participants? Both of these questions are part of a field known as collaborative data governance, which is what we will delve into further in the rest of this talk. So let's talk more about data governance in machine learning, and first how we define data governance. Governance is a nebulous concept whose exact definition varies significantly across domains. However, for the purposes of this talk, we will call governance a set of processes and methods for making decisions about managing data in a given context. These processes should be informed both by driving values and stated goals for the overall effort, and by applicable regulations. There are currently a few main ways in which we are managing data and datasets in machine learning, which include centralized dataset management in institutions like the Linguistic Data Consortium, public data repositories like the Hugging Face Dataset Hub, and open data initiatives like the crawl-based OSCAR or the PILE dataset. One positive recent development across all of these models in recent years has been the adoption of more well-spread and standardized documentation practices, spurred in great part by foundational work on data statements for NLP by Dr. Emily Bender and co-authors, and datasheets for datasets by Dr. Timnit Gebru and co-authors. This is extremely important progress for data governance, as good documentation fosters transparency, which in turn supports the agency of data subjects and other stakeholders in decisions made about data. However, all of the models we mentioned still have different benefits and significant limitations, and we have a way to go if we want to adopt data governance approaches that remain suited to the changing data needs of our field in language research and technology development. The good news is that there have been quite a few recent developments in the space of data governance in recent years. First, we have seen a significant uptake in data protection regulations around the world, including the PIPA Act in Canada in 2000, the General Data Protection Regulation passed in the European Union in 2016, the California Customer Privacy Act from 2018, and many others. We are also seeing more and more scholarship and activism on data governance from a range of diverse institutions. The list of icons presented here is far from exhaustive and focuses on institutions that we interacted with in the course of our work or heavily drew from. Given the international focus of our efforts, we want to draw special attention to efforts from the Tehiku Maori Radio that has worked and provided licenses for indigenous data sovereignty. The CPIT Center in Kenya that has done amazing work studying relevant regulations on data across African jurisdictions. And we also drew a lot of inspiration from the Claron network in Europe that focuses a little bit more on language data for social sciences. The work we are describing here was conducted within the context of the Big Science Workshop, a year-long project bringing together over 1,000 participants from 65 countries to work on training and studying a multilingual large language model in an open and collaborative fashion. The work took place across 30 working groups, addressing various technical and social aspects of large language models. Within this organization, the data governance work was most closely related to other data working groups focused, for example, on data sourcing, privacy, or on data analysis and visualization, and also to the project-wide working group on legal and ethical scholarship. The Big Science project presented a unique opportunity to make significant contributions to the state of distributed language data governance research in the context of large-scale technology development. First, because of its focus on multilinguality and geographical diversity, and also because of its multidisciplinary membership. Given how fast both the technology and the regulations surrounding the data and models are evolving around the world, designing processes for data management that work for all its stakeholders really requires having a space that allows these different perspectives and expertise to meet and interact directly. The Big Science project also worked with an ethical charter that emphasizes values relevant to data governance. These include inclusivity and diversity, which means that we want a new data governance proposal to allow language data stakeholders from around the world to participate equally without discrimination. They include reproducibility and openness, which means that the proposal should enable stakeholders to examine and interrogate the data that supports scientific findings and technology development. And the values include responsibility, which means that we want to do both of these things in the respect of people's guaranteed legal rights and while being considerate of their interests. It is also worth noting that the data that was selected by the data sourcing group in Big Science to make up the model's training corpus was not just multilingual, but actually had owners and custodians spread all around the world and situated in different contexts and jurisdictions, as you can see on the map on the left, which is further motivation for our distributed approach. So how did we structure our work on data governance in this workshop? We started with a preliminary definition of our high-level goals and the roles that come into play in data governance. We then took a second look at the values that should drive data governance. We mentioned having an ethical charter for the Big Science project, but we put it in a framework of value pluralism and acknowledged that the values had to have different definitions within the context of data and of data subjects. In particular, this comes from the fact that language data has dimensions to its context that exist independently of its use in machine learning. So we reviewed the social, legal, and technical context of language data by looking at questions such as language discrimination, privacy and user rights, reproducible research, etc. And then after we thought we had done our homework on establishing the context for our work, we started working on proposing an actual governance structure that we would like to be able to use to make the Big Science training corpus available after training, so people could examine what wanted to training the models that we released. So we designed a skeleton structure identifying the main roles and relationships, starting created buy-in from data hosts and providers by having conversations at every stage of the process, and started working on the technical and legal tools to support our structure. I'm now going to pass the relay to Dr. Margaret Mitchell, who is going to tell you more about each of those tools and processes.
Awesome, thank you. So what does this organization look like? The first step to devising a global data management structure is identifying the specific roles in data governance. Here, from right to left, we have the data rights holders that can have commercial ownership or personal rights over the data. We have the data custodians that typically manage and curate the text, and the data steward that oversees the general flow of data and its uses. Then the data modelers, that's us as NLP researchers, who conduct statistical analyses and train models on the aggregated text data. And we have another category that we call data helpers, which includes lawyers, advocates, ethicists, and anyone else who can help provide tools and context to help with data governance. We'll describe these roles and their interactions next. So there are four primary roles in the proposed structure. Data custodians host data and or provide it for hosting. These two roles may be filled within the same entity or may be spread across multiple entities. Data modelers essentially act as the body requesting the data. They define what the data is for and what kind of data is needed. In this case, the data modelers are the Big Science workshop. Data helpers are legal scholars, rights advocates, ethicists, who help define and work through the appropriate protocols, processes, and structures in order to abide by the data governance values, applicable law, and human and cultural rights. The data stewardship organization is the umbrella organization where representatives from all of these roles come together. The organization is in place to discuss shared goals, work on interoperability across different systems, prioritize tools and techniques that are applicable to the different roles, and harmonize different viewpoints and priorities. In addition to respecting the data governance values, agreements are needed between data hosts and providers on the one hand, and data hosts and consumers on the other. The data host provider agreement specifies, for example, that if a data provider creates an additional annotation for a data set, they will also share that back with the data host and vice versa. The data host consumer agreement mandates that consumers don't interact with the data outside of the access specified by the host. In a nutshell, the data custodians have a basic checklist of things they need to do. For data providers, they must provide data that is created in ways that are compatible with the data governance values, be willing and legally able to license data sets for research purposes, be willing to work with the data host who is hosting their data, including passing off the data and responding to questions. For data hosts, they must be a registered legal entity in a region of interest, be it a company, academic institute, NGO, and so forth. Be willing to contribute their technical capabilities to host local data, for example, by facilitating data access. Respect the Big Science ethical charter and data governance values. Abide by the Big Science data providers and host agreement, or a similar agreement they may already have in place with a provider if there is a structure already there. Liaise the process for data hosting requests with data providers, and optionally are willing to carry out data management on the hosted data, so processing, preparing, managing, etc. Within the context of the Big Science workshop, we've developed a data host data provider agreement that can be used if there is not an existing host provider relationship with an agreement in place. Data hosting support through Hugging Face, meaning that data hosts no longer need to have their own servers to host the data. They can just use Hugging Face servers if they want and set different access controls there. We've also developed some data exploration tools, including tools for examining the documentation, measuring different aspects of the data, and visualizing data topics and data similarity. Note that this is all flexible support. You can use the resources we've developed. You can use your own, provided that you're willing to abide by the data governance values. The main pain points have been confusion, especially at first. So difficulty convincing potential hosts to join, and inclusion beyond the US and Europe. This is a massive international governance effort driven by people just distributed around the world. It's a lot to wrap your head around if you're first hearing about the project, and it was even more difficult as we first began, and it wasn't clear exactly how everything could work. Many potentially interested hosts and providers just needed more information. We've also had difficulty having hosts actually join. In some ways, this effort can appear out of the blue, and it's hard to find places willing to engage if something like this wasn't already on their roadmap. Relatedly, including organizations outside of our network of people we know has been essentially impossible. So if one of us doesn't already have a connection to an institution, then we have to send cold emails, which tend to be ignored. This has led to location biases, so with most of our discussions and engagements limited to the US and Europe. We've also had some luck at creating flexible structures aligned to a variety of different values. We haven't had value conflict issues. We've had more success getting people interested in acting as hosts if they could start with data they already had. We found it easiest to connect with organizations that are not for profit or a public institution that works with data, such as national libraries. We've been fortunate to have public goodwill where people familiar with the project are supportive of what we're trying to do. And continuing this work, we're aiming to have a governance structure in place and persisting for a minimum of 1 year. We will continue to share tools and understanding for the data sets. And what we need more than anything right now is more organizations joining as data hosts. It doesn't have to be a lot of data. A single data set is fine. The goal is to have the basic structure in place. So if you are interested, please let us know. All right, thank you.